Call to order the regular board meeting of the Vallecitos Water District, Wednesday, June 20th at 5 p.m. Pledge of Allegiance will be first, and if I could get Director Sinella to lead us. Thank you.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. We need to adopt the agenda for the regular meeting. Roll call first.
Director Elkhart?
Here.
Director Evans? Here. Director Martin?
Almost present.
Director Sinala?
Here.
Now we need to adopt the agenda for the regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay, we're going to do a public comment, and we're going to read this because we do have someone speaking. Persons wishing to address a matter not on the agenda may be heard at this time. However, no action will be taken until the matter is placed on a future agenda in accordance with board policy. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. A request to speak form is required, which I have, and submitted to the executive secretary prior to the start of the meeting. Public comment should start by stating name, address, and topic. The board is not permitted during this time to enter into dialogue with the speaker. And I have as a speaker, Michael Hunsacker.
Michael Hunsaker, speaking as a private citizen. I live at 115 Equestrian Court. And the topic is a commendation for the City of San Marcos Public Works Department. I have gophers. I've got a lot of gophers. And I have been slowly clearing them out, working from my house to the back fence, which is a border between me and the city park of Walnut Grove. Walnut Grove has irrigation. I don't have irrigation in the backyard. And the gophers proliferate where there's water. I used to have 4 dogs and a very good hunting cat. Now I've got a half-blind, half-deaf dog and a cat that's just coming online. So I had over 300 gopher holes in my backyard. This morning, I noticed around the fence area that a lot of the gopher holes I haven't gotten to yet were wet. There was a big pool of moisture on the soil. And when I went out to walk through the area, I was surprised to find my feet went out almost out from under me, and I sank 9 inches into the ground. The gophers had been burrowing, and there were water leaks in the irrigation system. And they were traveling down the gopher holes, and everything was a big mud pit underneath an otherwise dry surface. I raised a complaint at 10:30 in the morning, and at noon, Public Works Department had someone out there. They discovered 2 valves were leaking, and they fixed it, and are fixing and double checking on backflow, since there's supposed to be some check valves in the system. So, accommodation, City of San Marcos Public Works.
Nice to hear. All right, moving on to the consent calendar.
Move for approval.
Second.
Moving and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Moving on. To action items. Study update for the district-wide solar project.
So District Engineer Gumpel is going to give the board a broad overview of our study that was approved by the board at a recent board meeting. So Jim? James?
Thank you, Vice President Martin, members of the board. First off, let me apologize because unfortunately you don't have the A-team here. The A team would have included Kevin Ross, who's from Terra Verde. But good news is, instead of having the C team here, we have Jennifer Petherick with Terra Verde, and she's the one actually doing the work. So she ups my accreditation up to B+. So hopefully you'll forgive me for that. With that said, today the goal today is just to give a broad overview to the board of where we are on the feasibility analysis on the district-wide solar. Hopefully get some comments and input with the intent of finishing up that feasibility study and moving forward to a future engineering committee meeting and then back to the board. With that, I'll get started. And of course, if you have any questions, please stop me. And if I can't answer, I'm sure Jennifer can. Okay, so we're going to start with just kind of some definitions. And I'm not going to go over every definition, but as I'm learning, because I'm not an expert in this field, there are a lot of acronyms. So I just want to give the board kind of what those common acronyms are. We're going to go ahead and look at the feasibility study summary, then the benefits of a power purchase agreement instead of actually funding a project yourself. And then we'll look at the assessment findings. And there's really 3 projects that are being highlighted here. Several options on the projects, but we're just going to kind of go over those 3 projects and you can see where they are right now. And then we'll go over kind of the draft conclusions, the next steps, and finally a rough schedule. With that, the first definition I just want to talk about is the net metering, NEM. It's basically if you were to put solar on your house, it'd be a NEM project. The power generated from the solar photovoltaic system at your house is being offset by your energy consumption at that property. The other big definition I want to cover is the RESBIT. I think that's RESBIT. Is that good? Close enough. Essentially what that is it allows government agencies like the Water District to build a centralized system and then use several meters that are off-site to offset the power generated by that centralized system. And again, I won't go over everything, but PPA is obviously the power purchase agreement, and then there's a whole other host of definitions used in this industry. I'm sure if I let Kevin or Jennifer explain even more, they could probably come up with another 2-3 pages. With that, let's talk about the feasibility study. So what Terra Verde did is they looked at every single SCG&E meter. And not only did they look at the meter, they also looked at 15-minute intervals of how we use power. So where do we use power, how much of power do we use, and when do we consume that power? They determined the sites that were sufficient. They did audits, basically performance of looking at the sites, site visits. And you can see what the sizing, the systems array sizing that they did there. You can look at, looking at the different tariffs that are available. What's the best fit for basically the best return on investment? They even looked at battery storage. Battery storage is basically emerging and see if battery storage is something that would benefit the district. And they did an analysis on that. And they did basically a financial analysis, which basically are both Wes and Mike from our finance staff is also reviewing and commenting on. And then right now they're in the process of putting together a findings report. So with that, let's talk about the applications. I was actually going to skip this slide, but since I have it up, Terra Verde realized that SCG&E rules were ending at the end of last calendar year to grandfather in the old-time use. Basically what SCG&E is saying is, during peak periods of times when the sun's up, used to be what the peak energy charge was, and now they're going to make that off-peak. But if you had a system or you're going to build a system, you could grandfather yourself in for 5 years. So Terra Verde had the foresight of notifying the district that and actually grandfather us into 2027 at 2 of our sites, which is Lift Station 1 and our Twin Oaks Reservoir sites. So this way we get more benefit of putting basically a power generating system out there because we get the kind of the old rules, which are more advantageous for us. So the benefits of a power purchase agreement, and I won't go through everything, but basically the way it works is government agencies, we're tax exempt, we don't get tax credit. So if you as a homeowner were to put in a photovoltaic system, you'd get roughly a 30% tax credit on it. We don't, but if we go through a power purchase agreement, the individual or the company that actually is the developer of that, they would get the tax benefit because they own, operate, and maintain that generation system, but they're using our site, and we get into a contract, and that contract's usually for 20, 25 years. There's usually zero or some type of negotiated escalation, and the idea is they get some benefit because they get the tax credits, and we get a lower per unit charge than we're paying with SDG&E with little to no escalation. And as SDG&E escalates over time, which is an assumption, our benefit increases over time. With that, let's talk about the first project, which is kind of that standard NEM project, which in other words, we're going to produce the power on site and we're going to consume the power on site, and it's for lift station 1. And this one, we looked at it a couple different ways. Cash scenario, and you can see from the cash scenario, you're looking at $650,000 in savings over a 20-year period. And then looking at if we purchased it, it'd be a $651,000 savings. And if we did a power purchase agreement, it'd be a little bit over $600,000. It's roughly about a $750,000 to purchase it yourself. So you can see the benefits of that power purchase scenario. We spend zero money up front, and we're getting almost the same benefit, not quite, as if we purchased it up front. Now, you also got to remember that most of the photovoltaic systems have a 25-year life, I believe, 25-year life. So at the end of the power purchase agreement, the useful life of that has been spent. We also looked at battery storage on site. Battery storage is emerging. The batteries are fairly expensive, and what we learned from this analysis is that our benefit is reduced. Even though we see some benefit, but that $615,000 savings is reduced to roughly $150,000, mainly because the cost of the batteries, which are close to $250,000. And you can see if you purchase it yourself, your benefit is a little higher. But still, it's less than going with the original power purchase agreement. Yes, sir?
If I can ask you a question, just going back, and it's for a future question, but
Yeah.
you said 20, 25 years, photovoltaic systems they're done, you need a new one. The one we have out here right now that we're looking at, we already looked at replacing part of it.
Mhm.
Does that mean the rest of it's done too?
The warranties on the panels, and maybe you can help me with this, is roughly 20 to 25 years on the warranty on the panels. It doesn't mean they stop producing power. And the old systems, that's an older system, the guaranteed rate of degradation is about 1% a year. And I believe the new systems, the guaranteed degradation rate is about 0.5% a year. So if they're losing 0.5% a year, now it compounds, right, but it's 0.5% a year, they still have useful life. But from a value of the asset, the power purchase developer is making its money in that 20, 25 years. And what I failed to mention is there's usually buyouts at certain intervals, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, there's usually a buyout. So similar to kind of like the desal contract with CWA, at the end of its 50-year life, you can buy it for $1, so to speak, because its useful life is money. It doesn't mean it won't produce power, it's just we greatly reduced and there's no more warranties left.
Thank you.
And here's kind of a picture of the array at LS1. You can see, I don't have a pointer that works well here on that, but you can see kind of at the bottom is San Marcos Boulevard, and that little buildings is LS1, and then the array moves up. And staff does have some comments and concerns if this is the best use of that site in the long run, because these photovoltaic panels will be there for 25 years. So. Next is Twin Oaks, and this is the Resbit project, and basically this is the bigger project. So you're talking about a 2-megawatt project. Just to back up for a second, LS1 was around 250 kilowatt project, and just to give you an idea, our system here is 340, so it's a smaller system than the one here at the district offices. The Twin Oaks project is a 2-megawatt project. So that is quite sizable. It includes 11 different meters that are off-site meters that consume the energy, from a transfer standpoint that's produced on this site. And you can see the savings on this over 20 years is about a $4 million savings through a power purchase agreement.
Question. What you're looking at putting at the lift station, am I correct in assuming that what you're saying, we only create enough power that we can use on that site?
Yeah, 90%. You're creating 90% of the power that you consume on a site on a yearly average. And that's the same as the photovoltaic panels that were here when they were originally installed. They were sized for 90%.
Okay, so you can't get more than that.
No, so for my understanding, and this is old memory, so please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. From a homeowner standpoint, for homeowners, you could produce up to 100% and still get that tax credit, or the power purchase agent, the developer, could still get that tax credit. But from a government or institutional or commercial application, it tops out at 90%. So you could get more, but nobody gets tax credits above 90%. Is
But
that-
you do get credit for the electricity produced.
Yes, but you don't get that 30% rebate, or the power purchaser doesn't get that 30% rebate. So you will get more credit for the energy produced, but if you're doing a power purchase agreement, their bang for buck as far as how they can pass through savings for you, for the district, stops at 90%.
Okay, I guess my question is then how are, I think Valley Center, but a few of them have fields that they've built. And it looks like we have enough room for 4 times the amount at lift station 1 of
Yes.
photovoltaics. So you're saying that that's not gonna pay us
Not
to
with
fill
a,
it?
not with a NEM project, which is a net metering project, but with a RESBIT project, you are allowed to. For example, Twin Oaks, that reservoir site, really uses very little power. So we're using 11 different meters, SCG&E meters, from 11 different sites to offset the amount of power that's being produced there. So when you have a huge array and field, the RESBIT project is the avenue that's been analyzed as our best, I guess, bang for our buck.
But we can't do a resbit at lift station 1.
Of course, you could if you wanted to, but you could do a RESBIT wherever you had room. So if the board so chose to evaluate doing that type of project at lift station 1, that could be analyzed also. And did you want to?
Yeah, just a red VCT project. The reason to choose a NEM project at the lift station is because you get full credits for your rate. So you get to offset your kilowatt hour rate structure, your distribution charges. It's a more financially beneficial rate structure than a res VCT, which is just a kilowatt hour charge credit. So if you have the choice, you would typically choose a NEM project, and you can't do both. You have to choose one or the other. A meter can only participate in one tariff or the other.
Okay, thank you.
For the RESBIT tariff, what's the maximum number of accounts you can apply against it? Is it 50?
Is it 50? Yeah, yes.
So the 11 that were selected were the only economically beneficial? group of
Let me skip a slide. The 11 selected for 2 megawatt pretty much covers the whole both the reservoirs. So I'm sure that had part of it. Was there any other
So the
considerations?
limiting factor was the size of the project?
So,
I
s-
mean, technically, you could use 50 accounts, it just wouldn't, under a PPA, it wouldn't be an advantageous return. for the-
yes,
for the-
there's no reason to kind of lock up your other accounts and keep them from being used elsewhere, and especially if you can't produce the power to offset it.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So with that, it's about a $4 million savings. You can see your bill credits first year is about $58,000, and then they go up as the escalation of SCG&E. And for these analysis, they assumed a 3% increase in SCG&E rates per year. And again, this is kind of the array setup, and you can see it pretty much engulfs the top of both reservoirs with very little extra room to spare. So, next project is.
Quick question, I didn't realize that. Is our property circular? Seemed to me it was pretty flat.
No, but that's the flat top on top of the reservoirs. The rest of the properties are slopes.
Slope, okay.
Yeah, and you know, your south and west facing slopes could work, but all the other slopes would not. So, you know, you could squeeze a little bit more here and there, but as you start moving arrays around, the cost of construction on slopes is higher, so. Floating solar at Mar, that's another option, and that could be another, to kind of address your question, Director Eltharp, that could be another RESBIT project. And that one is about the same size currently as the district facilities here, around 345 kilowatts. You can see there's a $739,000 savings, roughly $740,000 savings over a 20-year life. based on the assumptions. The other thing is, you could actually put a bigger system, up to 1.5 megawatts, I believe, at Mar, thank you. And so, but then you would have to include more meters and more things. So this could require a different analysis. Now, putting floating solar is more expensive of an install than putting solar basically on the ground on stilts. So that does have some concerns. And Mar Reservoir, the water fluctuation in Mar Reservoir, it goes pretty high to pretty low depending on summer and winter conditions. So that would be another consideration. So there'd have to be some more analysis, but there's basically untapped footprint, and I apologize, I don't have an exhibit for that of Mar, because this 340 doesn't cover nearly, it only covers roughly a quarter of Mar. So looking at the project and seeing what meters you could use, there's an opportunity you could do 2 RESBIT projects that and encompass more meters along with the NEM project.
Would you also save money with algae control?
Yes, and that's a side benefit, and actually we're talking directly with Livingston Water District, because they're the primary agency that gets hit when algae blooms, because City of Carlsbad, they send it to their steel tanks, which obviously is covered, and they could add chlorine to the system, but Livingston takes water directly from Mar, directly to the customer. So the side benefits could be you shade Mar Reservoir, which helps reduce algae. You also help reduce the amount of chemical use to kill off the algae. And those are all side benefits, but we need to, again, Terra Verde's contract didn't go into that depth. One of the things that staff is going to do is talk further with the Livingston staff to see if this is something that they're interested in participating.
And what's the surface area of Mar Reservoir versus South Lake, which is another piece of property that we own?
Mar's smaller than South Lake, but I don't know the surface area differences.
So South Lake, we'd have to guess, could do the same or better.
Yes, one of the things that you have to also consider is the infrastructure. Mar's close to major electrical infrastructure. I believe at Twin Oaks, we'd have to upgrade the infrastructure, so the power purchase developer would have to basically upgrade the electrical lines all the way out Twin Oaks. But since Twin Oaks is so big, it'd still be worth it within the price. Mar Reservoir has a lot of electrical infrastructure with all the development around it. South Lake does not. I mean, it's close, but you'd still have to upgrade electrical infrastructure all the way into South Lake to get it into there. And now with the development, the new development coming close, it makes it better, but it's not size for this type of system. But that's something that can be looked
I
at.
just throw it in the mix as to when we're doing our planning coming up, and that's another potential use of South Lake that would be beneficial to our customers.
Are you gonna show kind of an image on the next slide?
I don't have an image of that, I apologize.
I'm just kinda curious, I'm sure you've thought about this, but as the water level changes, I mean, are you just talking about floating kind of in the middle of the
Yeah,
reservoir?
so-
And so that way it doesn't, it's not
Yeah.
covering the entire thing, right?
So typically floating reservoirs are put in the middle, so you figure out the worst case scenario of the lowest water level, and then they're still floating, and then they float out, and they're tethered to the bottom, and they're anchored, so they stay in place. The Mar Reservoir fluctuation is so great that for us to use more than this 340 and get it up to 1.5 to cover soil, they'd have to be built on stilts. So they would float when the water's super high. As the water came down, they would rest on some type of stilt. It would increase the cost. Again, we'd have to do further analysis and maybe even get a partner on board before Mar Reservoir, an expanded Mar Reservoir would make sense.
I'm sorry, but South Lake stays fairly constant.
Well, Ed, you can help me out with that.
No?
South Lake does not stay fairly
Does it
constant.
have the fluctuation that Mar does?
Not annually, no, it does not.
You have to remember, South Lake is only fed by rainfall, so
Right.
when we go through 4 or 5 years of drought, it gets extremely low. So it'd be the same thing as Mar, you'd have to keep it in the center.
Floating,
Yeah.
but a possibility.
So looking at basically some draft conclusion, there's a strong project segments for the lift station NEM project, and there's strong considerations for the Twin Oaks RESBIT project. You could also see that battery storage, and there was a whole battery storage analysis that we didn't really get into, but that Terra Verde did. Doesn't seem to pan out at this time, but we could always go out to the marketplace to see if we get some better prices, because battery technology and prices are changing constantly. It's kind of the new emerging portion of this. The size of our reservoir, as I mentioned before, is optimal for a reservoir project at its current size, utilizing all of our meters, but obviously can be expanded, but would need further analysis. From a what's next, we're giving an overview presentation to the board today with the hopes of getting some feedback, like looking at South Lake, for example, and looking at maybe more into Mar, and then coming back and finishing the report. So Terra Verde is going to take information. We have comments that are coming from our finance staff on some of the analysis to refine the assumptions, because some of these rate assumptions, we want to make sure that we're comfortable with those rate assumptions. And then basically come back to a committee or board sometime in July, August timeframe. And I want to point out to kind of page 43 of your board packet. That's the second page of item 2.1, and that kind of shows you the budgeting. And I know that when we first awarded this project, the board mentioned where are the off-ramps. This would be the first off-ramp. If you could see from the fiscal impact on page 43, the Terra Verde contract, the first planning stage, that's where we are today, is a $62,000 effort roughly. And in that August timeframe, when we come back to the board, that's the board's opportunity to either take that off-ramp or move the project down. So in other words, if there's viable projects that the board's interested in pursuing, whether it's one project, two projects, or three projects, because we've scoped up to 3 projects, that's the opportunity for the board to either give direction to staff that yes, we want to pursue them, or no, only pursue one, pursue 2, or don't pursue any. At that point, if with board direction, we enter the next phase, which is that next design phase, what I want to call, which is the roughly $97,000 phase, in which the RFP process where we put the plans and specs together, we solicit solar developer companies, start getting the power purchase agreements, start negotiating that. At that point, we bring it back to the board for results, whether it's through the committee process or straight to the board. And at that point, the board could review the analysis and recommendations, and that's the second off-ramp of whether we want to actually move forward with a power purchase agreement or a project that we pay for, or stop the project entirely. And then the last phase is the construction phase and the finalization. With that, just kind of putting some dates with that. The first phase, we're still talking July, August, depending on committee and board availability. And then once we have that direction from the board to move forward with a project or a multiple projects, you're looking from roughly August to March 2019 timeframe for that process. Once that process is done of soliciting and negotiating the power purchase agreements, bring it back to the board for approval, then you're looking at roughly a year to actually construct and implement. Now this is years based on doing, I believe, all 3 projects. So obviously, the bigger Twin Oaks project, for example, that's probably a year project no matter what. But the other projects, if it's a smaller project that's picked, the time frame could be adjusted. With that, that's pretty much the end of my knowledge on this one, unfortunately. But Jennifer is here to answer questions, and I could answer some questions that are more district-specific about our sites.
Director Alfaro?
Yeah, so I noticed on some of the slides, it said the financial analysis included assuming that the rate was grandfathered to 2027.
Yeah, so for, and originally I was going to, sorry, I went too fast.
And so that was to grandfather the,
Yeah, so that's the, Terra Verde pointed out the application, and we grandfather in 2 sites, Twin Oaks and Lift Station 1 to 2027.
right, so that protects us from the shift to the 4 to 9. So
Yes, exactly.
So it's the current, it's 1 to 6 or noon to 6 or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
do you remember what, noon to 6? Noon to 6.
So in 2027, so is the assumption then for the second half, for the second 10 years of the project, would it be 4 to 9?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a big assumption right there. There's no telling what's going to happen to rates.
Yeah, and that's one of our comments. Obviously, you're just getting kilowatt credits, but we don't know if SCG&E will further shift credits, especially on the RESBIT projects where it's an offset, or if SCG&E will actually change the rate structure in its entirety. Now, there's a rate assumption, and it averages out to 3% a year of rate increases for SCG&E. But as far as the assumption in what's going to happen to the rate structure, really, we couldn't make any assumptions besides what's on the
I mean,
book.
that's a big unknown. That's part
It
of
is
the
a big
risk
unknown.
of a project like
Yeah.
this.
Now, what will happen is, depending on what SCG does, it would probably make battery storage more optimal. But since we don't know what's going to happen in the future, that analysis will need to be done later.
A quick question is, the reason that only you have those two grandfathered and not MAR, is that because you didn't ask for MAR, or because it won't be able to?
We didn't ask for MAR at the time. So basically, if you recall, we actually got Terra Verde under contract in January, I believe. While we were still negotiating the contract, they brought this up and they did this ahead of time for us. And they already, from their original proposal, identified these two projects. It wasn't until our contract negotiation in January that we, as staff, added MAR.
Okay. Director Sonella?
Thanks, James, and I'm glad that we're at least looking into this. The one kind of takeaway that jumped off the page for me was lift station 1. You know, a 25-year commitment is significant for that little piece of land, and I think it's safe to say, you know, we could what if it all day long, and what if this happened, what if that happened, but I think it's safe to say that that stretch of San Marcos Boulevard is not gonna look like it does today 25 years from now. And so there could be greater potential for that piece of property, either through a different use, a sale, who knows what kind of development might take place there or around that area. And I would hate to do something that locks us in for 25 years.
Yeah, and that's why one of staff's comments were, you know, addressing through committee and board process, what is the future best use of site? Because it would be a 25-year lockdown of that site.
Yeah, and my only concern is, like I said, it looks like there's only like 30% of that land being used.
Mm-hmm.
And a thought process that in the future, if you were to, instead of putting the photovoltaics on the ground, if you put them
On the roof.
on a roof, you can use that as parking, and next door could be built out, which that guy's a builder. I mean, so there's a lot of thoughts to that, but thank you very much, a lot of great information. But I would like, it would cost anything just to assess South Lake?
No, we could definitely add it to the scope. I would have to
Just
talk with,
for the
I'd
heck
have to
of it.
talk with, I don't know where their budget is, so I'd have to talk with Kevin, who's not here today, on the budget, and we could take a look at that. And come back through the committee process and let the committee.
Well, but we are in July, we're having our
Strategic planning.
strategic plan. It'd be nice to have all that information on the whole thing, ready for the strategic plan, actually. I mean, that's when you're gonna make big decisions, or you
Yeah.
could make big decisions, big directions. Thanks,
We'll try and get everything as ready as quick as we can.
thank you.
Thank you. So this is just
That's
a board information note and file. We'll definitely, the two things that I'm taking away from this is taking a look at expansion at Mar Reservoir and also looking at South Lake. And that's my understanding.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, James. Okay, we have Wes and company. It's an adoption of resolution electing to have sewer service fees for improvement. And this, I do believe we do every year. It's just a matter of adding it to the sewer bill.
That's correct. This item comes to the board on an annual basis. Sewer Improvement District A is an area where we provide sewer-only services, and water service are actually provided by other districts such as VID. And we've elected to collect our service fees on the tax roll. So the county requires us to bring this to the board on an annual basis and to set a public hearing to discuss the method of collection of these fees. So with that, staff recommends that we approve the resolution and set the public hearing for the next board meeting, which will be July 18th, to specify the method of collection.
Okay, we need a motion?
Move for approval?
Second? All in favor? Roll call or all in favor? Roll call, please.
Director Elgar?
Yes.
Director Evans?
Yes.
Director Sonata?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Wes. Good job.
Thanks, Mike.
And then, comes Ed. Approval of 2017 Consumer Confidence Report.
And this is another one of those reports that we do every year. It's something that's required by the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you, Vice President Martin, members of the board. As General Manager Prum just mentioned, this is something that happens every year. It is part of the federal and state regulations, so we're required to take all of the data we get from our treatment plants, sorry, that was me hitting the buttons, and put them into this report, let the public know what we found in their drinking water, and it is regardless of whether it exceeded a maximum contaminant level or an action level. And from this report, I'm happy to say that we, again, meet or exceed all of the standards set by the federal government and the state. And be happy to answer any questions on it, but it is something that we have to post before the end of this month.
At home, do you use drinking water from the tap, or do you purify it? Use a filter?
I get it from my fridge just because it's there, but I also drink it out of the tap. Yeah,
The fridge has-
I'm a customer. So.
Fridge has a filter on it?
The fridge has a filter, but it's nice and cold.
Mostly convenience, right?
But yeah, but I drink it straight out of the tap too.
Yeah, it was just happened on the news last night, which really, and they were talking about the lead and the problems Flint had, and, you know, no one trusts government now, and there's no amount of lead that's safe in water, but it's naturally occurring.
Right.
So what we have is naturally occurring, but there's no amount that's safe, is
So-
what they were talking about on the news. I don't know that, I'm not a scientist or a chemical engineer.
Right.
But it's kind of like if one drink makes you an eighth drunk, 8 drinks makes you drunk. So, with that, looking for approval, no?
Yep.
Yeah, approval of the confidence report.
Move
Just
for
approval?
approval?
Move for approval?
I do.
Motion made, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great job, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you for teaching Wes how it's done.
Yeah.
Oh, this is gonna be a long one. Approval of San Marcos Chamber meets your elected officials, Sundowner Mixer, per diem expense reimbursement. Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, so this is the chamber is hosting their annual Meet Your Elected Officials mixer on Thursday, July 26th. And that organization is not on the list of organizations that's covered in Ordinance 203 for pre-approval for compensation. So if the board members want to attend and be compensated for their time and expenses, they would need to take that action today. So it's just a request for the board for direction.
Okay. Anyone gonna say anything? No?
Well, I want to just say something kind of related. I was going to say it during board member comments, but there's been a lot of changes at the Chamber of Commerce lately, and especially in the last year. So I would like to, you know, in the future meeting, invite them to come and maybe give a little presentation, 10, 15 minutes, to tell us a little bit about the latest of what's going on, both at the Chamber and also in our local business community. But they used to be on this list that we have, that you referred to, General Manager Broom. And during the drought and kind of some of our budget cutbacks, I think we made a decision a year and a half, 2 years ago, to remove them. Now that we're out of the drought and things are a little bit different economically, we don't certainly have to decide tonight, but I'd like to maybe, you know, talk about that as well. And that can maybe coincide with their presentation as to maybe we want to reevaluate a potential partnership like we had in the past. As far as tonight's item, I don't plan to attend, so I don't really want to take an action either way, but certainly willing to.
Well, I'll bring it up. Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'll bring it up. As the way I always look at things, if it's something I would normally attend, I certainly don't ask for per diem. This is something we're requested to as board members to attend, and I think that paying us a per diem is a good idea. And maybe in the future, we should just put this down as a consent item, or put it down that the Chamber of Commerce yearly elected officials get together, because we do represent Vallecitos Water District while we're there, and we are asked a lot of questions. As last year, we were inundated. I think all of us were inundated with questions. So I would hear from everyone else, but I would make a motion that, yes, we do approve it for per diem.
I'll second that.
Okay?
And just as a comment, I think the time I've been on the board, I think every year we have approved the per diem. So
Yes.
I think it's totally appropriate.
And I'll just, I think it's a worthwhile event to go to, definitely, but I feel as an elected official, I should be there to answer the questions, and I don't need a per diem to do it. I feel it is my responsibility, so I won't be supporting the motion,
Okay.
but I certainly support the event.
Okay. Call for a vote. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
No.
And they're not in favor, 3-1. Passes. General manager report.
Yeah, some items. So Metropolitan has recently announced that they're going to begin to change their water blend. They had been 100% on Colorado River water, and they're shifting over to 35% state water project and 65% Colorado River. I think it's going to take them 2 or 3 months or so, and Ed may know, to fully effectuate the change of where the water is stored. But it will be in a direction of a better water quality. I don't know that the average homeowner will notice it, but it will be slightly softer water. Next item, Diamond Environmental Services. The final settlement has been done. I attended a check presentation ceremony today. The FBI special agent in charge of the investigation presented a check to the Encino Wastewater Authority in the amount of $637,102. And according to the general manager from Encino Wastewater Authority, all those costs have been passed along to Vallecitos, and they believe that Vallecitos should in turn get that check. So they will be placing an item on the June 27th EWA board meeting to authorize their general manager to remit that same amount of funds to Vallecitos Water District to cover our costs that we incurred because of the illegal dumping by Diamond. So. And just a couple of quick updates on some recently awarded projects. We have the water line rehabilitation projects on Stargaze Court and River Run Circle. The access pits have been dug. The high lines are being laid out, but they're not, the jumpers aren't put in yet, so the people aren't on the alternative water supply or water connection. And the liners are expected to be pulled next week. Tuesday and Wednesday, I believe. We're not sure which project will be which day. As soon as we find out for sure, I'll let the board members know. And I'll tell you later in my update, I won't be around then, but it'd be a good opportunity for the board to go see that operation where they actually pull the liner through those pipelines for rehabilitation.
General manager, are we still under the exact timeline that we gave those people when we went out and talked to them?
Yeah.
Exact.
So, and we're continuing the coordination with the property owners to make sure they're aware of the status of construction.
Will you or Chris be sending out an email with the date and time?
I will send it out to the board. Next one, the board recently approved a project to replace some of the corrugated roofing out in the yard here. So just to let you know, that's under construction, started I think last week. It should wrap up by Monday of this week. They've already done the car wash and the fuel island, and they have a couple more smaller facilities to go. They're replacing those old composite corrugated panels with metal roofing. The locker room expansion project, the contract has been awarded, and the contractor will be mobilizing next week, and we anticipate about a 90-day construction window. And the last one is
I heard it was backed up because they couldn't find the gold faucets, the back ordered.
I'm not going to swing at the low ball in the door. The last project is the boardroom updates or upgrades. The contractor is currently fabricating the staff table that will be right in here, and that's kind of the long lead item. And once that's fabricated and delivered, they will start doing all the rest of the project because there's a lot of wiring that will go to that table there. And we think those improvements will begin in August, early August. So we still don't know exactly what status or what state the boardroom will be in for future meetings, but we'll keep you posted and we'll minimize the impacts. If we can't minimize them, we'll consider relocation of the board meeting, but I don't think that will be required. And the last thing I wanted to mention is my vacation plans. The board knows that today's my last Board meeting before I go on vacation. I leave next Tuesday on the 26th, and I'll be back on Thursday, July 19th. So with that, that's all I had for updates.
I have a question, Glenn. Do you have a date set for the strategic plan?
I have some kind of tentative thoughts. I'll have to coordinate with Diane to formalize those.
Okay.
I would like to get it done in July. I just don't know if there's enough time between when I get back and get my legs back under me and the end of the month. So it may be beginning of August, if not the end of July. And I know you have some travel plans, so we're trying to hit that window before you leave.
Thanks.
Yeah, just you're gone the month of August, right?
Yeah, essentially, yeah, the month of August.
Okay, that's it. District Legal Counsel.
Best Best Krieger has a public policy and ethics groups that you may have heard or know about. They just recently issued some guidelines on preventing serial meetings, which continues to be a topic, and those guidelines will be issued to all of you just for your review. It's a memo form. It just basically covers what issues are that public officials face relative to the Brown Act and violations of the serial meeting preclusions, whether it's what's called a wheel meeting, where you communicate with a staff person who then communicates with another director, and then they communicate with another person who then communicates with the director relative to positions on action items. That's what's known as a wheel, or a chain, where there's just a serial, one Director A calls Director B, and Director B calls Director C. Then we've got a Brown Act violation. It's got guidelines relative to what to think about in terms of preventing those types of meetings, because obviously you can contact staff to ask questions and get information. What we encourage is that you ask questions and get information, but don't relay your positions relative to items that are coming before the board for deliberation at risk of those being shared. It also includes a discussion on emails and text and social media, which has become more of a problem. So if you're on Facebook, all of you together communicating on a action item or something, expressing your opinions so others see it, and we create a daisy chain or serial meeting. Just thinking about those in the context of this world, and as I think you've probably been advised, if you've got cell phones with personal, where you conduct district business on personal emails, texts, those are all now subject to the Public Records Act. So I'll send that out to Diane and Glenn so they can send them around to you.
Thank you, sir. San Diego County Water Authority.
Well, our next meeting is actually on the 26th, and I don't have that agenda in front of me. It's mostly a workshop, though. But I did have two quick little things on legislation. July 6th is the summer recess begins for the Sacramento, and they'll be returned, and then the legislature will be gone for the summer session and come back on August 6th. The last day for each house to pass the bills is the end of August, and the last day for the governor to accept the bills or act on the bills is the 30th. And in regards to a little bit about that, I know you're aware that the water tax, a trailer bill, so to speak, was rejected. But I think the most important part is to understand, as it says, it's just a victory for the moment. It's a temporary victory, and it has are people who are pursuing it, and it could come back either as a trailer bill or SB 623 again, or something different. So everybody is still on high alert and very involved in that process, and we really won't know until midnight on August 31st if it's not happening or it is. The Water Authority is still very involved in that and working with Aqua and CMUA to encourage that it goes, that it's opposed. And then we're also working, I wanted to, on the water tax, we're also working, advocating support for AB 2050, which is the, by Caballero, which would create the small system of water agents authority to take over the agencies that are non-compliant and small and combine them. Is It's a very methodical and well-structured one compared to other options. We're hoping that will go through. And it was scheduled actually today, but I don't know what happened in front of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee. They've also launched, Aqua's launched, maybe you've seen it, but if you have people asking you questions, you can refer them to Aqua's watertaxfacts.org. It's the great website for information on the water tax. Also, we had some sponsored bills that we're hoping will still go through. AB 2064 by Gloria Weber, and that's wanting to make accountable opportunities for money to be given in advance to disadvantaged communities through the what is the Integrated Regional Water Management Program. So if they are eligible for a grant, they'll get the money ahead of time rather than wait till it's over and paid back. That's to their advantage for those communities. AB 2371, which is the measure by Korea for the DWR Independent Technical Panel consensus recommendations regarding water use efficiency for landscape, is still being pursued, and that should be to the last committee on June 26th. And then I think we talked about the Imperial Valley, and it was trying to get a group of both agencies, NCOs, NGOs, and others involved to form a technical panel to help establish the Salton Sea 10-year water management program. And that unfortunately didn't meet its April 27th policy committee and is now enacted. So the Salton Sea as always seems to get hit with a wait and see, wait and see, wait and see, which maybe that's how it should be. The efforts by DOD to have the agency shut off policies and procedures that we're not terribly pleased about because a lot will fall on us is going in for action on June 26th. And then I have a little thing on the recent water efficiency regulations, and it's just, I'll pass it out, but it's just that a lot of the information that's going out is either misleading or misunderstood. And it's just reiterating that there is no state mandate for individuals to reduce their water inside 55 gallons per day, per person. That's just part of the calculation that's going to be used for the water agencies. And a lot of people have heard that I can't do my laundry and take a shower on the same day because that would be using too much water. So if you're hearing things like that, it's important they understand it's not about the individuals, and it's only part of the calculation. The fines are for agencies, they're not for individuals. The water agencies at this point will be able to decide, they'll be given their allowance, and they'll be decided how they want to distribute their water and handle conservation or water efficiency use on a local basis, and that's really important.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is the water, so this seems like a little bit of a different tone, is the water authority now supporting this? Because even though that the fines are not on the individual but on the district, ultimately it still goes back to the individual.
No,
The district
no.
doesn't have any of our own money, we only have their money.
Right. Well, the water authority is totally committed to continue working on this project to make sure that it's equitable and it's reasonable and it's tied to your local conditions. And it's a process is what it is. And I do think the state itself has taken, the government has taken the attitude, we're gonna do this. But as far as how they're going to be determining it and what's going to make it, how you'll get your exceptions and how you'll decide it, that's all still under challenge. And actually, it won't even go into effect until 2023.
Which is right
So
around the corner.
that's their objective, is starting it then. But so we have some time here where we're all going to be arguing about it.
Okay, good, because I still have deep concerns regardless which of the two ways they do it. And I think it's going to have a negative impact on our local businesses, our residents, our economy.
I agree with
And I
you.
think it's also going to have a negative impact on this district, and it's going to end up driving up costs for our customers.
Well, I think anything they do is going to do that. But you're absolutely right, and that benefit we've all been champions of it. You know, San Diego County has gone down 47% in its usage from 1990 when the last big drought started, and we've done a great deal, and at this point, there's not a lot of recognition for that. And there's still an uncertainty about how they're going to determine, how will they define people, how many people are in a house, and what land you're using. There's just a lot. So what is really important, and I'll pass this down to you, is what it's doing. It's just a calculation of objectives that are still unsettled. It's more a declaration of this is where we're going.
So as long as we're not taking our foot off the pedal in our
Oh,
opposition to it.
absolutely not. We're not at all joyful at this. Mostly it was what people thought it was for individuals, and it was already assigned, and I think it's important that individuals know it's not, what's the word? It's not in concrete, certainly, and we have a lot of work to do.
Might not to keep belaboring this point, but my concern is that I have seen even our public relations team sent out a really nice kind of warm and fuzzy piece on social media and others about how it's not for the individuals, but it wasn't really clear that it's still going to be very bad for the individuals, even though that this is not for the individuals. If the district is fine, or if we're restricted on the amount of water that, we're on a water budget, it's still going to have the same net impact to the individuals, one way or the other. So I don't want to, in correcting the record, which needs to be corrected because the stories that
Right.
broke early were inaccurate. But in correcting that record, let's not give the perception to the public that it's all going to be okay, because it's still really bad.
Did I say that?
No, well, you kind of put a positive spin on it. Not you personally, but we did, everybody, all the articles that I've read that are trying to correct the record, they're,
Well, I think the positive, you need kind of do also, I agree with you, it's going to be tough, but I also think the reality is the water's going to be less, and we're going to have to do something. That's the reality. And in being honest with their people, I think I don't want to scare them to death and think it's going to be 55 gallons and you have to bring your neighbors in the day the census walks through to say all 20 of you live in the house. But I also don't think I want to tell people that it's not a true, maybe it won't be 50, maybe it needs to be something else, maybe it will be a whole different way by the state with different politicians. But the reality
I think
is,
we gotta-
the water isn't going to go the way it's always gone.
Well,
It's not there.
I think if we mobilize the people in time, we have 4.5 years to get people to speak up, and maybe we can stop a really bad thing from happening. That's all. We're not gonna solve this here at this point.
No, we're not. But I guess I don't understand what you expect people to stop, bring more rain?
No, I expect them to get involved on this matter and fight the governor in Sacramento, and this is bad, at the end of the day, it's bad public policy. And it's gonna have detrimental effects on our economy and the cost of water and our quality of life. And I think people, when they heard the 55 gallons, they couldn't take a shower and do a little laundry, there was some outrage brewing. We see that today with what's going on at the border, right? And if the public gets involved enough, and there's enough outrage, you can see, as we saw today, that public policy will change. And so that's all I'm saying, is let's not present the picture that it's not gonna be as bad as it was going to be, because it is really gonna be bad. And so let's get the people informed and let's get them involved.
Okay, I totally understand what you're saying. Thank you. And I think that was the end of my comments.
Okay. Encina wastewater,
Okay.
either or committees.
All right, the EWA Policy and Finance Committee met on June 12th. We considered 4 items, and they were amendments to EWA's financial reserve policy, investment policy annual review, financial management and accounting outside services authorization, and another south parcel temporary construction easement authorization. And that's to accommodate Caltrans on the I-5 widening project.
Excellent.
That was it?
And you're gonna be bringing us a big check next month.
Yes, I plan on it.
All right. Director's reports on travel, conferences, seminars. Let's start on the left-hand side end with Director Evans. I don't know if you have anything.
I don't think I have anything to report.
Director Elefant?
I think the only thing I attended was the Council of Water Utilities.
Yep.
Yesterday. Had two speakers. The first was Jerry Merrill with the Natural Heritage Institute on the upcoming November water bond, which I think it's hard to tell from the literature. It looks like it amounts to a little over $2 billion in another water bond, which I find rather surprising, but according to this gentleman, the public has a 4-month memory, so they'll forget all about all the other ones we've passed recently. And
That's what he said.
yeah, so interesting talk. It looks like it's got money for just about everything under the sun, so
Yeah.
he gave out a really good comprehensive information packet on it.
Well, is that him?
Yeah, the other one was a lady by the name of Summer Curley with the Center for Organizational Effectiveness on leveraging employee engagement to gain improved performance. And she had a lot of good information.
I was at the same meeting, the only meeting I had, and I thought Jerry was very interesting, him and himself. This $2 million bond, I noticed that how it was going to help our local agencies, and $200 million was to the dam up north. Oroville Dam,
Yeah.
and how that trickle down helps us. And I'm like, right there, he lost me. But, and I don't think people only think for 5 months and they forget that they just passed a huge bond. And now they're asking for $2 billion more
Yeah.
or whatever, so I think that's a slim chance, to be honest.
And who was he exactly?
He's with I don't know much about that organization, the Natural Heritage Institute.
I wanted to ask him who's paying him to be there, but
I take it
sometimes
they're a
feel-
massive lobbyist in Sacramento, but
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, he's on commission.
Yeah.
But you always wonder where they're coming from.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to step on, I was at the same event, and I'll step up on my soapbox briefly. But yeah, the level of arrogance from this gentleman, he did not, there was probably some people in the audience that agreed with him, maybe even the majority of the audience, but there were certainly people sitting around me that were just shaking their head, literally cursing under their breath, and he just didn't get it. And the level of arrogance for him to actually to present to any audience and say that the public and the voters have a 5-month memory on these types of things, completely unprofessional and uncalled for. We just passed a couple years ago, almost a $7 billion water bond.
just a couple of weeks ago, another one.
Yeah,
700
and
million.
for him to come back and think that that the public's going to go for another $2 billion on top of that, they haven't even tell us what you've done with the last 7. I'm on this board, and I couldn't tell you what they've done with the money in any kind of detail. So no, it's just I'll step.
Yeah.
No good.
Well, the trouble is the public doesn't realize how much of that time we pass it, and then it just sits there in a pot and doesn't do anything, doesn't go anywhere, it takes forever to process it through. Yeah, it's really disgusting.
The name actually escapes me, and maybe you'll remember it, Director Evans. On one of the trips that we took, the WEF trip, went way out of our distance to go to a middle of a field in the middle of a valley to say, this could be the next great dam.
Oh, that's the site
Sites
reservoir.
reservoir.
Well,
Reservoir.
and, my
And they're
question
still
is,
arguing about that.
that's 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and nothing's happening. Other than the landowners, they're sitting there smiling, because they keep going up and up and up in price, and they're gonna have to pay whatever it is. So it's like, they're not doing anything good, so, those bond things are not getting a lot of support from a lot of people. So,
Well, they must be somewhere, but I think Southern California has a different approach to water than the rest of the state. So maybe we'll want to be 3 states.
You may be 3 states.
Yeah, there you go, it could be 3 states. We all be the state of something.
It's very different.
All right,
Assuming he's coming from the north.
Any other business? No, director's comments, future agenda items? Seeing none, adjourn the meeting. Meeting's adjourned.